communicated, and that there are opportunities to definitely use media and technology to do that. And in some cases, I think it's a strong arm approach of holding people accountable. In other cases, it's ways of just providing information that didn't exist before. I'll give you actually a very simple example, but turns out when there's dead rats in the street, it's actually up to DPW to pick them up, Department of Public Works. So one of the things that we've looked at is there a way in which when someone uses this SMS thing, and this isn't built yet, but we're looking at this, if they tweet a picture of that dead rat directly to DPW, can that be a way to prompt DPW to go and pick it up? It's actually not holding them accountable. It's a way of getting the data into their system that didn't exist before. And so I think that there are like big levers, like big media levers that you can use to hold people accountable. There are small things that you can do to make new connections through things like social media that didn't exist before. And then there are ways in which you can use media or games or other activities to stage events. I mean, the event at which Councilmember Dickens and Young were there and engaging in this activity around AMI and affordable housing, it wasn't about holding them accountable, but it was about, again, actually providing a kind of safe place to have a pretty, at times, heated conversation. And I think that can be really important.
Yeah, and I think some of it already goes on to a certain extent, like you said. So we haven't figured out, how to integrate rats, because previously that had been a county issue and not a responsibility of the city, because the health department is a county thing, not a city thing. But with some other stuff, so we have 311, which is the main call center where people can call in to relate issues that they have from wide variety. Either they didn't pick up my trash, like all sorts of things go in there. And they recently entered into social media space with, like, the day they opened like a Twitter and a Nextdoor account, like the amount of replies that they got from like, hey, 311 is now on here, and they started opening cases based just on people's replies. So people didn't have to go fill out the form, people didn't have to dial 311. Now they can tweet at them or post on Nextdoor, and someone will pick that up, provide a case number so they can track it, and like it gets logged into the system that way. So we're learning there's lots more ways to take in data. And with the latest thing on the city, the mayor's been very focused on like potholes and other things. That's how a lot of the information's been coming in. People tweet at her, either thank yous for coming to like remove this plate that's been here for a year, or I have an issue with this. And so people are responsive to that. I think overall she is very committed to being more transparent. She announced like open checkbook and some other things that are going to go online. That'll be open data. It was open data before, and you could request it. It just wasn't easily like accessible, or for you to be able to troll through and other stuff. Like, you should be able to go to the website, look at my name, know what I do, all these other things, since I am a public servant. So being more transparent about that, so that people know, like, what are we spending stuff on, like, where is it going? I think that all plays into it in helping keep people accountable. And then some of our sister cities also have, various sort of project management, like tracking software that allows us to tag. So New York has one that they use called C-Track. And it goes across departments, not even just their resilience office, and it allows them to tag stuff that says, like, we publicly promised this. And so then it ranks it higher when you go in to pull a report, if you look at like all the things or projects from DPW or from Office of Resilience, and the things at the top that says you publicly promised this, by what date, like other stuff rings to the top when you pull the report, so you can pay more attention to be like, we promised people we would finish this by this date, like where are we at on, like who needs to be involved, multiple people can look at it. So I think from that aspect, then data is helping cities be more accountable. I don't know that it was overall a place where people weren't trying to be before, but unfortunately sometimes cities can be the last place for like technology upgrade to get integrated in. Sometimes just due to budget and our own procurement system sometimes limits us from being on the cutting edge of where we can be. But I think cities of the future are looking more toward that, especially as you leverage like limited resources and people. How can we be better and streamline that so that we can better serve you? I think the gentleman back here had his hand up. You good? Oh, yes.
I have several questions.
Okay.
I'm actually retired from the health department.
Okay.
And I've worked every inch of Fulton County.
So you know.
All development, 22 years. So my thing is, I've seen development, I work on all sides. My first first question is with the rat thing. I've been over community sanitation, solid waste, wastewater treatment, all of that. So with the, I like the ideal. Like I said, I just left Fulton County. They're antiquated. They don't have that in place. Doesn't, you know? So that's the first thing. You probably have to get them on board. I can tell you from Buckhead to Bankhead, which is now Hollowell. I've seen rats from lakes.
Yeah, everyone has rats. It's not limited.
Right.
So my thing is really about education with a lot of the public understanding how rats, because people have dogs or animals and the rats feed off of that. So you know, most people think just because it's clean, it's not. That's one.
They love chicken.
Yeah.
So you know, when we track that type of stuff, but even in the health department, taking in calls, they don't have anything to really track it. Put on a spreadsheet, or if somebody calls me, I basically write it down and say I need rat data. We don't. It's not really a good tracking system, so they really have to have a better tracking system. And again, it's very antiquated. Now, the other thing is, I've seen a lot of development, but with the housing part, and I know it's not with you all. I don't know how much they have in the office for the city, but I haven't seen anything in my 21, or I could say years, with any new development for underserved neighborhoods or even people that are in equity, because I'm sure they have the housing department has money, but it's never any development that's in there. I have complaints all the time, and I'm trying to help seniors out, and I call the housing department. They're always out of funds. They never have funds to help out people. So I always say, how are they able to engage to release some of that money? They're giving $20 million to a particular private organization, but they're not able to give it to a resident who's actually working, and they just can't afford a low interest loan or give them some type of money to fix up their property or whatever. They give it to the private organizations, like Aquarium wants $8 million. And they get that released to them before somebody in Vine City or whatever is able to have money released to them. So I just always wonder, how are residents able to access the money?
Right. So I think with the housing thing, and it is something internally they are working on and have an internal sort of housing group. I think part of the issue is that housing assets lie in various different offices, so there isn't just one. So at the city, there is a housing and community development office that does one piece of it, and then there's Atlanta Housing Authority, which is like a quasi-government entity, and they have their own set of assets that is outside of mayor's office in like city, but it is still a quasi-government. And then you also have Invest Atlanta, which is like the city's development arm, and they have a certain amount of programs around housing for either first-time buyers, or they give credits and other things to developers for other projects to happen, and so they have a set of assets as well. And so one of the starting places where we need to be better self-organized is to organize and to have an idea of how many assets do we have between the various entities who control different pieces of housing, and how can they work together as one unit so that people don't have to jump through as many hoops to figure out like what's the direct line for you to get help if you need it, and then how much money is going to directly to development. So there is money going to development for affordable housing. It may not be in the place that people think it is, I guess I should say, that gets built. So most of the senior high-rises and stuff in the city have all been redone over. Those mostly fall under the purview of Atlanta Housing, so not the city. And so they're in charge of like who gets in, the waiting list. Those have all, for the most part, been updated. There are a few that are still on the wait list, but for the most part, they've all been systematically updating and doing senior housing first. This housing assessment can also help exacerbate that, and then, you know, make sure that the amount of money the mayor has committed to what she wants for affordable housing goes to the best places, so that we move the needle, so that we aren't here 5 or 10 years from now and we did this whole assessment and we knew exactly how much we needed and where it was going to go and the trends, and we still lost out because we didn't make the right choices about the money. And so I'm not saying that money isn't a factor. I am saying that money has been thrown at a lot of things in a lot of underserved neighborhoods where hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent and they're still in the same place. So the issue isn't just the money, it's how we are spending the money and where and how is it best making an impact that needs to be improved upon in order for us to move this. And then quite frankly, we also need to have frank conversations about what is the underlying reason why we've ended up in this situation and why we have the issues we have across issue areas, from transportation to housing to other stuff. And it has to do with race and equity. So unless we fix or transform that mindset that goes into the reason why people make decisions, it doesn't matter how many houses I built, how much public transportation I built, and other stuff, you will still end up in the same place, because the root problem of this is people's attitude and other stuff toward race, equity, and poverty. And like, we need to also work, that needs to be transformed too, to have a different mindset, a different culture around it, and how we value things as we grow as a city and what is most important, in order for us to actually have like true change over a longer period beyond just, I actually built a senior high rise or I built some affordable homes over here.
They say about the growth, but I always suggested, my suggestion, and I know it's again, is that maybe people who live in a house that are seniors, they have a fixed interest rate that they can't, and they at over a certain period of time, if they sell, then they sell at the market rate they pay back. But from a humanitarian standpoint, I'm gonna give you a personal experience. This is, you know, helping an older woman out who has a problem with her house. In the preceding mayor's neighborhood, and people are calling, 80 years old. My job is to make sure she gets it repaired, take her to court, put a lien, or even put her in jail. 80 years old, who's on a fixed income, really no family. City has no funds to get her repaired. Now, from my standpoint, I can just be like, oh, I'm gonna have to write you up. Now I'm gonna put a lien on your property. It's already got 2 or 3 liens on it. Now you're gonna go to court. If you don't get it fixed, you're gonna go to jail for environmental public health issues. So, using my resources, I'm able to get little things done with contractors, save her 10 grand because they're doing free work.
Right.
But it's just amazing that I just get so upset, and I'm just saying that private companies can get quick loans, and a senior can't even get anything.
I think part of that is we have to look at the conversation on what health is, right? So most of those, to that point, most of the folks that need the assistance, that senior on a fixed income, her income is higher than the total poverty level. So she may be bringing in $30,000, but that poverty level is $29,000 or negative 4. So she doesn't qualify for the support to get those different things, but she doesn't have an income to pay back the loan. So I think from a public-private type of standpoint, we have to look at ways of saying we need to change the threshold or look at cases on an individual basis. And it's going to take the lawmakers in the city to say, you know, we are willing with our community development departments, our housing departments, to say we have to tweak the numbers a bit to be able to help what needs to be.
Yeah, and I think we also have to be creative and go outside some non-traditional routes about it. So is a traditional loan product even something that we should be discussing with seniors at their age and other stuff? Or should we be thinking about quality of life and how can people age in place? Because quite frankly, you need mixed income, mixed race, mixed age neighborhoods all the way around Metro Atlanta, not just in one place. Because quite frankly, affordability is relative. So we all have a limit to what we can pay, no matter what amount of money that you make. So the major reason that there's so much pressure and gentrification on the South is because it has become unaffordable to live up north, and so people are shifting from north to south. That actually is in far more of an affordability crisis in the South, but people wouldn't think that people only focus on below 20. But the whole reason you have this is because people can come down, they have more money to live in the South, but it's because the North has outpriced them. And so what you need, but 80% of the jobs and opportunities are things above 20. And so we need to be a better job of building where people can live everywhere all the way around, and people don't have to have major shifts or take 3-hour bus trips to get to work. Like, we have an affordability issue also in Buckhead as well as we have in Adair Park. Like, these are all affordability issues of how we set up and lay out like a plan for a metro area. I think the young man over here in the back with the yellow around your neck. Yes.
Okay. So we thank you for the city. You see that a lot of your policies and programs will impact on the behavior of the residents and the behavior of the people who live outside the city as well. So how that changed the development of the city? Do you see the vision to be something like a perfectly area in the state or something else? How people would use downtown and the people who live outside the locations?
So your question is repeat the question again, how would I envision?
Yes, the city would become, would it look like, maybe Seattle or Southern California?
Got it.
Metro, because
of the others. You're right. So, you know, for as much as we acknowledge the other counties and it is in Metro Atlanta, Atlanta still is the epicenter. So there are times when some of our sister counties are moving faster than us and we can learn from them. But for the most part, you know, Atlanta has to sort of start the wheel moving, and then it sort of trickles out, sort of like a hub and spoke to our sister counties. And then on top of that, right now the city's population currently is just under 500,000. I think we're at about 472,000 or so. But during the day when people come to work, we balloon to over 1 million in population. So for a good, you know, 40 to 60% of people's time, Mayor Bottoms is their mayor for the 8 to 10 hours during the day that they're in the city. And so people have an expectation of a certain level of service, of which they aren't our tax base, but they come in and they do impact our systems and our ability to operate as a city. And then on top of that, we're growing at a pace now that by 2040, we're projected to be at over 1.5 million. And that's just people living, not even including like the amount of people who will come and go to work. And so, you know, from that aspect, we have to be always very cognizant of like what legacy are we setting, and how are we leading the way so that this can become, so we can be a leader for our other counties and surroundings, and how are we becoming better partners with our counties so that this isn't a push and pull back and forth. We should all be working in concert together, because the suburbanization of poverty is growing at a far greater rate than in the cities and in counties that were not prepared for the amount of services and systems they need to support that level of poverty in the surrounding counties. And so that matters and affects us as well, and our ability to attract other businesses, opportunities for people to move here. For the most part now, despite our wealth gap issues, unlike other cities like a Seattle or the Bay Area who've sort of outpaced and just become completely unaffordable, we still attract a super diverse amount of population of people moving here, both in income, race, gender, and people still sort of feel like this is a place of opportunity. But, you know, we're on the tipping point of, you know, within 5 to 10 years that may not be the case if we don't put in some like hard stops now, especially with the amount of development that we have. And, you know, if you consider that's an average of like 273 people moving into the city every day, like that is very dramatic event to happen that, you know, should we get, you know, an Amazon or Google or another big company to come, that will just like totally make that process happen far more rapid. So I do think, you know, it is in talks when we talk about things, people just don't solely think about city. We think about how this might affect other things and who are our partners in this, and how can we also move the region forward, because that, as the region grows, we will grow also. The region is about, what, 5.8 million, and it'll grow to 8 million. So it's even gonna grow at a way, way faster pace than the city. And so we have to become acutely aware of that and what sort of systems are being built in. And I think that's why things like the ATL and other stuff have emerged, because I think our sister counties have realized that like this just isn't a us issue. It's a far greater issue and will have a far greater impact on their growth and ability to sustain themselves. I think you had a question? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So then, do you feel like there might be a disconnect between growth and sustainability? Like if you were, say, to get a big company like Amazon to move here at that time, do you think then that we would still encourage growth in all areas, or do you think it would be more just collective growth in specific groups?
I don't know if it's so much an encouraging of growth. I would say that growth is happening no matter what. And if they were to move in, there would be probably extreme amount of growth in and around wherever it was centered, but the rest of the city would continue to grow regardless of that. No matter what happens, like Atlanta is growing, this is the place where people want to be. We have like 15 or 16 Fortune 500 companies. We have so many other reasons why people are moving here. Even without that, it doesn't, I don't think it stops the growth, or people just stop and concentrate on one neighborhood. Like everything is going to have to grow in order to support the amount of people coming into the city or the metro area.
Well, awesome. If that does it for questions, please let's give them a round of applause. Ms. Garrett and Dr. De Silva, we certainly appreciate you coming. It has been a phenomenal, phenomenal conversation. And to go first for what will be a long afternoon, we definitely appreciate you. Let's give them another round of applause, please. Please feel free to take a short break as we prepare for the next panel to arrive for probably the next 2 or 3 minutes, okay? And the restrooms, the nearest ones are out the door and to the left, kind of around the corner. So we'll start back up in about 3 minutes. Thank you. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna try to. Did you see Odie? He's in there. He might be on the side. We do, man. We do. Awesome. Awesome. Love you all. There are 4.
So we doing 4 chairs?
We're doing 2 chairs.
There's 4 of us.
First, we're doing 2 chairs. Good luck.
Like, I'm confused.
At the end? Okay, so. Yeah, so let's put trying to pull this thing up.
Oh, his presentation?
I'm trying to pull it up. Come on. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. Just drove from down the street. I was like, oh, so glad it's so close.
I may need to.
You wanna? I could turn my hotspot.
Let's try that.
Yeah, 'cause I just got knocked off there.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me know when it's fine.
Yeah, go ahead. It should be running. Don't laugh at my password here.
Go ahead, type. He said, I'm going to laugh. Had you met Ricky yet as well?
Oh, I know Ricky.
You know Ricky?
Come up here, Ricky.
doesn't? Who doesn't? Please just put it.
Yeah, it says it's connected. So,
Oh, what's up? Oh, awesome.
I tried to search it, but
Awesome, awesome. No, he's right here.
okay.
Jordan Love. Kelly, I think they're gonna have these. Hey, how you doing, man?
All right, how
They're gonna,
yourself?
Kelly's gonna moderate this particular
Hi,
panel.
how are you? Nice to meet you.
So, Kelly, you're gonna have a wireless mic tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we're waiting for the Mr. Morris. We're waiting for the testing.
Okay.
Give it a second. Thank you.
Is it big?
Look at that.
He doesn't need to go through all of this at all. Yeah, because both of them is really pretty lengthy.
One, two, thirsty. Did you touch this button? Here. Is it
Okay.
move? I'm coming up. Right. Okay.
That's been with me, Lord, and brought me safe thus far. Don't you know tense. And just like the river, I've been running ever since.
Mike. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We're going to take about 30 seconds to settle in for our next panel. Thank you so much for your patience as we got technical things worked out, but I think we're ready to go. Before I introduce our next panel, I wanted to recognize Jared Fields, who's the president of the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, who's joined us today. I'll give Jared a round of applause, please. We've also got State Representative Virgil Flood. Virgil, you still with us? All right, yes, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. And I wanted to just pause for a brief moment, panel, if you would, please. I wanted to give Natalie Hall, one of our new Fulton County commissioners. Here in the county, we're in Fulton County right now, if you're not familiar, but Natalie Hall has joined us, and she wanted to bring not just a welcome or greetings, but just talk a little bit about the importance of tech as a new county commissioner. And so please welcome Natalie Hall. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your Fulton County District 4 Commissioner, and you are inside of District 4 right now. My district goes from Inman Park all the way over to Fulton Industrial Boulevard. It touches 75 North, comes around Hallowell, Donnelly Hallowell, Howell Mill Road. It goes down Cascade to the Andrew and Walter Young YMCA. And I'm so glad to be here because I wasn't really supposed to be an elected official. But as God would have it, this is where I am. I actually started out as a gamer and a techie geek in Chicago, born into a very powerful political family. Cook County Hospital is named in honor of my uncle, who was the first black president of the Cook County Board of Commissioners in Chicago. So Cook County Hospital is now John H. Stroger Jr. Hospital. And thank you. And so I was the girl, usually the only girl in an environment of all men, and I was a gamer, I was a techie geek, I hated politics. I moved to Atlanta in 1988 actually thinking that I was running from politics, and I ended up working for EDS, Electronic Data Systems. It was the rival to IBM, owned by Ross Perot, who ran for president. And I thought that I was actually just going to be an IT manager and just continue my technology career until one day my neighbor, Joan Garner, ran for a commissioner, and she asked me to help her. I said, that's the craziest thing I ever heard of. I'm a techie person. Why would I get involved with helping an elected official or someone run for an office? And she said, you know this. You grew up in it. And so I told her, well, I'll help you behind the scenes because you're my friend, my neighbor, my mentor. And she won and went into office in 2011 as the District 4, well, it was District 6 at the time, Fulton County Commissioner. And I worked for her for 6 years as her chief of staff. And then she passed away last year in April from cancer. And I had a decision to make. Either I was going to find a job and go back into technology, or I was going to continue to try to help the people. And what I really wanted to do in my heart was continue to help the people. But I knew that the only way I could do that was to run for her seat. And the people called me to do that, and I said, I'm not a politician. They said, that's exactly what we don't want. We don't want a politician, so you're perfect for the job. And I ran and won, and actually was sworn in December of last year, and I'm now your District 4 Commissioner. So I say that to say that you never know where life is going to take you. You may start off in technology, and you may end up as an elected official, as I have. So just stick with it and follow your dreams, follow the pathway, but also be ready for the call. If it changes, follow that, because that might be actually the path that you need to go through. And in Fulton County right now, we have lost our CIO. Our Department of IT is kind of turned upside down right now, and we are looking for technology people. So I would say if any of you are looking for a position in government, please visit fultoncountyga.gov and check out the IT jobs that are being posted. We're going to be posting a lot more over the next few months and going into next year. So, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much again, Commissioner. Let's give another round of applause, please. And so the next panel, we've got a very exciting lineup for you. Of course, we started the day, for those that were here, with Councilman Dickens talking a little bit. We just heard from Councilman Dickens with Atlanta City Council. We just heard from Commissioner Hall with Fulton County. But now we have the opportunity, after Cicely Garrett with the Office of Resiliency for the City of Atlanta and Dr. DeSalvo with Georgia Tech, to really hear from some leaders and practitioners with this next panel coming up. We have the distinguished pleasure of having Kelly Suzanne with the Georgia Municipal Association, who's going to moderate this particular dialogue. And so please give them a round of applause as we welcome them to the stage.
Thanks so much. As he stated, my name is Kelly, and I'm with the Georgia Municipal Association. I have the honor and privilege to serve communications and marketing capacity for the over 530 some odd Georgia cities. So one thing I will say is I've seen a lot of innovation start and stop and kind of get stalled, but I'm so excited to have this panel here. So we're going to start off with a quick introduction. Everyone's going to introduce themselves and then share a project that they're working on in their current role.
My name is Justin Johnson. I am the Assistant County Manager for the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County. I've been in this role for just over 2 years, but prior to my current role, I was the City Manager of Bisbee, Arizona, and also the Deputy City Administrator for the City of McDonough, Georgia, just south of us. I think two projects that I guess I'd like to share a little bit about is recently Athens-Clarke County has embraced what geospatial technology can do for us, and so we created, the Mayor and Commission approved in the budget on last year, the creation of the Office of Geospatial Information Technology, and as well as we were very fortunate to be one of the first 100 cities to receive the recognition of the What Works Cities initiative by way of the Bloomberg Foundation out of New York.
Odie Donald, I am the city manager for the new city of South Fulton, the newest city in the state of those 536 cities. We're the newest one, but one of the biggest on the block, fifth largest city in the state of Georgia, third largest in the metro. Prior to joining the city of South Fulton, I was the director of the D.C. Department of Employment Services, which is the equivalent of the Labor Commissioner and Economic Development Commissioner for the District of Columbia. Two projects I guess I would highlight is one, from the District of Columbia, we actually were able to stand up the DC Infrastructure Academy. And so what it is a national model for creating infrastructure opportunities and connecting business and public sector through a public-private partnership that will put over about 100,000 people to work. Here in the city of South Fulton, we have some equally innovative opportunities where we are actually standing up a 311 customer navigation center. And so through this center, it will operate very similar to many 311 related activities, but we've started an interactive model where we'll have our own app and things of those natures, so people who are looking to report everything from code enforcement violations to even potholes and things of that nature will be able to do it not only through a call center but also through an app.
Good afternoon. My name is Ricky Clark. I am the city manager for the city of Jonesboro. Prior to me serving in that role, I did some work in other municipalities around the region, as well as I am a member of the Clayton County Development Authority, where I serve as the treasurer. One of the biggest projects that we are working on now is bridging technology with the process of coming in to get a business license. So what we are turning to is a complete concierge service, similar to the way if you go to Apple, you set an appointment, you meet with a customer representative. So what we're working on is taking down the red tape from that process so that when you come in to open a business, you're not talking to someone at a window, you're actually sitting down and getting that individual service. And the way that we'll communicate with you where we are in that process is either through technology, using the same technology that Mercedes-Benz has embraced. If you drop your car off, if your car is getting serviced, instead of receiving a call from Mercedes, you're going to receive a technology. I meant you're going to receive a text message back. So we're working at completely rolling out that model before the beginning of next year. In addition to the 311, we've also worked to enhance the way that we communicate with our citizens and with their complaints. Oftentimes, the biggest complaint that we receive is either potholes, trash, sanitation, something along those lines. So what we're trying to work towards is a way so that our staff has accountability, and a lot of that is because of the technology and the mishaps of us recognizing or us seeing what those complaints actually are, and the actual public knowing how to communicate with us with those different approaches. So we're looking at, how do we bring back our government and make it work for our citizens.
And I'm Jim Olson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Safety for Republic Services. We're actually a trash and recycling company across the country. We have about 15,000 drivers that are on the road every day. I'm also here representing a coalition of companies called Together for Safer Roads. It was originally founded by AT&T, AB InBev, and AIG. We've been members of that coalition for about 2 years, and we have a lot of projects going around, actually the globe. And I'm going to speak to some of those today. But most importantly, we actually had a project locally on the Northern Avenue corridor roadway system. For those of you that don't know, that's actually one of the, highest hazard roadways in your city here. The crash rate accidents on that roadway are about 200% higher than other parts of the city, and we put together a program to try to improve roadway safety on that roadway. And we've taken that same model to other groups. So I'm going to run through an overview of what those things are later or now? Right now. You want to hand me the flipper? There's a remote right there in the middle. Great. So Together for Safer Roads is a coalition that came together because roadway crashes are, quite frankly, at epidemic proportions across the whole world. It's actually the leading cause of death for people that are in their late teens, I should say, to early 20s. And it's projected to be the 7th leading cause of death overall across the world. Vulnerable road users like people on bicycles and walking are obviously impacted tremendously by crashes on roadways. If you think of the infrastructure in the United States, we have crosswalks for children. In a lot of other developing countries, they don't have that. So you can imagine how many traumatic incidents there are across the world. So we came together with other private organizations to come up with solutions to those roadway traffic issues. Specifically, we have a few different pillars that we work in, and through our organization, Republic Services, we provide a lot of information for safer companies and fleets, which is to provide expertise in the area of roadway safety and ensure that we have good education programs and a lot of different opportunities for people to be successful out on the roadways today. We have 3 different major projects that we're working on now. One of them here in Atlanta, one actually in China, and then the other one in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And they're all similar in fashion, which is trying to, again, bring companies together, municipalities together, and then ultimately data together, and this is where technology comes in, to identify where we can improve and what we can do to make roadways safer. So again, it's a worldwide effort to do that. Specifically, in terms of our impact, what we're really trying to focus in on is diagnosing problems, ultimately implementing some sort of solution, and then evaluating to ensure that we've actually had a positive impact on that roadway or in that area that we're working in. One example of that is in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Roadway crashes there aren't really measured by the officials at different regulatory associations or state officials. So we were a big part of them helping them put together a system to actually start tracking that information. In Shanghai, China, it was actually all around communication and education. So the former basketball player Yao Ming is actually one of our representatives, and he helped send that message around to everybody that's kind of in the neighborhoods around roadway safety and bicycle safety. Things as simple as wearing a helmet if you're riding a scooter is something that's pretty foreign to a lot of different, again, developing countries, and we try to implement that type of knowledge and education for people. Locally, the impact that we had on Atlanta was, again, founded in the fact that the North Avenue corridor, the rate of crashes was about 200% higher than the rest of Atlanta. So everybody was trying to come up with solutions to the problems associated with those roadway issues. And ultimately what we've done, since we've actually put in this campaign and this approach, and things like extending light sequences for crosswalks, changing yellow light sequences. I don't know how many people pay attention to light changes when you're driving in your personal vehicle, but they are different. There are delays where all 4 lights, if it's a 4-way intersection, will be red, and they can change that delay cycle. It can be a very short 5 seconds, or it can be as long as 30 seconds. So think about a 4-way intersection where you have a lot of pedestrian traffic. One way to eliminate crashes with pedestrians is to delay the time that a light turns red and then the corresponding cross traffic turns green to ensure that the roadway is actually clear prior to vehicles entering it. So there's a lot of different things that we do, and we're pretty excited with the results. We've actually seen a 26% decrease in the number of crashes that were on that roadway, specifically improving rear collisions, crossing over center, accidents, and then also even side swipes. So there's been a very positive impact on that collaborative effort between the city and then all of the private companies, and then of course the nonprofit organization of Together for Safer Roads. Lastly, this is really kind of the exciting piece and why I'm really happy to be here at this meeting and kind of make sure that our message extends past into Black Tech Week 2, which is we are looking for people that want to participate in roadway safety campaigns. And specifically, we have a global entrepreneur program which is trying to target tech startup organizations that have new initiatives and new innovation on how to make roadways safer. One of the ones that we have, for example, is with an organization called Haas. Haas is currently working with, emergency services vehicles to provide information to people in passenger cars through apps like Waze. So if you've ever used the app Waze to get from point A to point B, Haas provides information to Waze users on traffic collisions that have already occurred on a roadway. A lot of you have probably seen this before too, traveling in Atlanta, where roadway crashes breed roadway crashes. So there's often a secondary event after a primary event. So what Haas is trying to do is educate road users to prevent not just the first crash, but that second crash from ever happening. Another group that we're working with out of San Francisco is Ouster, and they provide a new, groundbreaking technology called LiDAR technology. And what it's doing is it's helping drivers like ours in the waste collection business to back their vehicles more safely. It's giving drivers a 360-degree view of their surroundings. But what's really cool is it's smart technology. So if the truck has backed on that same section of roadway several times, the system will identify hazards that are always there, or even hazards that are regularly there, like pedestrian traffic. And then lastly, ZenDrive is another, startup that we're working with, and they're all around educating road users and tracking road users through an app on your phone. So you can load different apps on your phone to track where you are, how fast you're going, what condition you're in. But ultimately, ZenDrive is actually working to gather all that information and then share it, not individually, right? There's a lot of protection and privacy issues associated with data, but globally sharing that information to try to identify where crashes may happen, where we have the largest concentrations of traffic, and so forth. So that's a little bit of an overview of why I'm here through Republic Services and Together for Safer Roads. And we really want to continue to work with cities, which is why this panel is so exciting, to try to make roadways safer for all and prevent fatalities from occurring.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. So I really want to get into these questions we have here. Now, I know we're all working in cities and working in local government, and so not one resident or constituent is the same. What are some of the challenges that you all have faced, whether it be here or in other states that you've worked in, when it comes to really introducing this driving innovation in different initiatives? Anyone can start.
I think one of the bigger challenges that we have is, as a local government, is the use of open data. And the gentleman back, he had asked a question about, how, when you have the creation and use of data, is it available to citizens, how do they use it? And being a university community, one of the biggest challenges that we have internally is our own culture. As I guess many of you know, Athens has historically been a very well-managed community, but in many respects is very conservative in our thinking. And so the challenge that we have right now is how do we push the envelope and start to use data and evidence, but also invite our stakeholders and our citizens into the process. But being a university town, you have so many PhDs and master's degree students who study this one very minute issue for their entire life. But we have a degree of skittishness within our own local government to share that information because we may feel like some of the questions that may come up, we may not be able to answer in real time quick enough. And so that's one of the bigger challenges that we have as a local government. But as I mentioned, our inclusion into the What Works Cities initiative has started to change our culture organizationally, and so we most recently have two more employees who just graduated from the Center for Government Excellence through Johns Hopkins University, and so that's allowed many of our employees to start learning more about how do we use data and evidence and starting to introduce that into our community and also invite our constituents into the process.
And I think I could add, too, that the other end of the spectrum, upon my appointment to the city of Jonesboro, was the other end. It wasn't the well-educated, the affluent. It wasn't that. So my understanding of technology and the way that I've embraced it in other places was totally different from what I walked in on the first day. It wasn't a systematic process using electronic softwares for agendas, citizens' complaints. It wasn't that. And I often told people, at the end of the day, innovation is anything that was around before you. So being innovative, it doesn't mean that I'm creating this computer program, but at the end of the day, the number one focus is making sure that we can communicate from a policy lens those things that we are creating in the city. So for me, it was first showing them that technology is nothing to be afraid of. So we started it off with our mayor and council. When we come to these board meetings, it's a waste of staff time to prepare these booklets of all of these different sheets of paper, because now it becomes an issue where we're wasting money. So I slowly introduced it, utilizing refurbished laptops out of the cop cars. I say, hey, we're going to try this, The first thing, hey, we'll just try Dropbox link. And they liked it, and the way I infused it, I said, instead of just using Dropbox for that agenda file, simply PDF'd into that file, we started using that file to send pictures of them at different city events. So now they feel like this system works for them. In addition to me being able to see the documentation for those meetings, now I'm being able to share pictures from different events. And then we bridge that into getting them comfortable with the actual technology portion. And in my mind, I'm still like, we have a long ways to go. But for them, it was new. It was innovative. They were sharing it. They were excited about talking about, now we're utilizing this electronic process. And then that evolved to now the full spectrum iPad, electronic system, So for me, it's all specific as to where you are, and then how can you embrace them or show them a different way. And sometimes you just have to slow walk them, use innovative things, whether it's putting a picture of their family, putting a picture of their pet into that file to get them accustomed to clicking on that file. Now it becomes simpler for them to integrate the agenda process. Now it's just full spectrum.
So I would say the biggest challenge, depending on different places that I've been, is always the same. It is expectation, budget, and appropriateness. And so aligning all of those things, when you're looking at innovation, it's always finding an appropriate solution to an existing problem. And so the timing of that is usually based on the expectation of your people, and there's never enough money to meet that expectation. And so you've got to balance all three of those. In the District of Columbia, you have $15 billion government. In the city of South Fulton, we got a $65 million budget, but boy, they both want it at the same time, which is yesterday. And so trying to balance the desires of those folks that you answer to, which is your council, as well as those constituents who we all answer to, is really the biggest challenge. But, you know, in good government, you get it done.
Yeah, and I would just tag on to the data issue. That's our biggest challenge, is sharing data. Private companies tend to try to keep things close to the vest, and they don't want to share. So that's why we're so excited about the North Avenue corridor, is we got AT&T's data, we got AIG's data, Republic's data, UPS data, and put it all into a black box, so to speak, to come up with some answers. But to get people, companies, municipalities to share that information has definitely been a challenge for us.
Definitely. You all bring up some great points. So I think one thing that I really want to speak to that maybe the audience may be asking as well, I mean, we have so many people in here that are creatives and creating these platforms and these apps, but they're going nowhere. How is this scalable? How is innovation scalable for, you know, Black Atlanta Tech Week?
I'll go first on that. So that's exactly what I was talking about with the GEP process for Together for Safer Roads. And what we're trying to do is give people a platform to scale. You know, so Haas being a really good example, they're working locally in Chicago is where they're from, and they're targeting school zones and trying to make school zones safer. But ultimately, through Together for Safer Roads, we're giving them a launching point to get exposure to other organizations, other cities, and it's really about networking and talking to the right people, because your point is exactly right around timing and budget. If you find the right place at the right time, it's pretty easy to expand, but if you're trying to push something at the wrong time because of financial constraints, it's not going to happen. So that's a big piece of what we're trying to do, and really excited about that process, is bring more people to the table in the right circumstance so they can grow.
I'll certainly say there are opportunities for certain aspects of technology to be scalable. I think one community that has done it very well is actually in Arizona, the city of Gilbert. They have an Office of Digital Technology, and the way they've embraced tech, the way they've engaged the youth in the city of Gilbert is phenomenal, and they've done it right. Quite frankly, I'm jealous, because I really feel like that's something that we should have been doing a long time ago, at least in Athens-Clarke County. And so there are opportunities, and I think about all the innovators that are here in Metro Atlanta, even out in the, rural parts of Georgia, out in Athens. I mean, the environment is ripe, for the tech community if you have an opportunity to engage and connect and really reach out and build those bridges. I do believe it's scalable when you have an organization like GMA that, quite frankly, is a conduit for communities outside of the metro area, but the willingness of the tech community to reach out in the rural areas. If you see a problem and you realize there's a solution that you all have, I mean, I think that's something that local governments are certainly open to.
I would echo and say, for me, it's always, if you have that idea, bring that solution. Let us work on a way to integrate it within the process of what we do, and then be very intentional about the relationships that you build. It's always, how is that first conversation? That conversation isn't, hey, Ricky, I have this app I want to use. That's the wrong way. Show that you are dedicated to the community at first. And then build that relationship so that it's an open door conversation, Hey, Ricky, my name is Kelly. I have this phenomenal app that I'm thinking of. I think it will help you as it relates to communicating with the constituency as to what you're doing. I think, just creating those intentional relationships.
Now, how do you go about creating those relationships? Is it going to city council, or emailing you, or what, as city staff, what is the best way to do that?
For me, I have a pet peeve if you come to communicate with me at our city council meeting. I think that is the regular business meeting of the city where we as staff have tirelessly worked to put forth those legislative items. It's not the time to come to complain about what my office did, It's, for me, it's call me You know, get on the calendar. Let's have a conversation. Let's have coffee. You know, let's talk through what it is that you may have an issue with, or an idea or an opportunity that you may have. And who knows, in that conversation, I probably can steer you a different direction and tell you, well, do this step. Go here first, you know. But for me, it's just communication.
And so I'd say in local government, it's probably the best opportunity for people, whether it be in technology or whether it's small business, to really access opportunity. So in state government, you've got even more rules and regulations, same thing with the federal government. But utilizing just the Georgia example, I think you've had 20 new cities in the last 10 years. And so I can tell you from my experience, we definitely don't know how to do it all. And we can't do it on our own. I think Mr. Neymar Strickland, he's our IT director. He's here, and he's a one-man band right now. And so when it comes to technology, innovation, and opportunity, we're always looking for new ways to connect. I think we'll be launching, we mentioned the 311 platform, and so we know how we're going to leverage applications to put it out, but we don't know how we're going to connect those applications to our call center, and so we'll be looking for a vendor to do that. When you look at even the DC Infrastructure Academy, which got some national acclaim and the district got credit for it, we used about 20 different outside vendors to pull it together for us. And so when you're talking about local government, not only are you able to bring in ideas through things like unsolicited proposals or just one-on-one meetings, you know, with people to bring an idea forward, you also are able to really engage throughout the process, whether it be through a formal RFP process or it's just meeting with somebody and offering a service to add on and make that process easier.
One thing I will say, and I really appreciate the question that is constantly asked in Athens. When someone has an idea or a solution, the question we ask is, what problem are we trying to solve? And we consistently get a lot of ideas that may not be relevant to what it is that we're trying to do as a local government. So being able to ask that question, and I think it kind of drives the conversation a little bit further and a little bit faster, and you can kind of get to a solution that you may be looking for.
Thank you. So pretty much what they're saying is that possibilities are out there. Just communicate right and, you know, just use those tools, like just to make it scalable. So thank you all for that. So obviously we are innovators and always thinking in advance. So what's next? Like, what is something that you want to try? Is there like a secret you can tell us that you're working on in your community? What's next for you all as innovators?
Man, I keep grabbing the mic. I'm sorry. I'm actually an introvert. One thing I will say, one thing I will say, so we talked about the use of data and evidence as it relates to helping local governments make decisions. One of the things that we have a very hard time with, just like the private sector, is there's so much data, but we have a very hard time, one, in communicating what the data actually means and how to organize it. And so those organizations that can help local governments pull those pieces together and help us get organized with our data, that would be extraordinarily helpful. There's an article that we passed around our management team called The Death of Expertise. It's in the Atlantic. And you read that article, I can just Google something, now I'm an expert. You know, but now we're at a place where, you know, specifically with data and evidence, for those organizations that can help local governments organize it and help communicate what it actually means would be extraordinarily helpful.
Oh, what's next? So I think we brought some information from the district, from South Fulton, to just kind of highlight what we're doing next. You got that clicker? So very quickly, so you can tell me where to point, Clay? Oh, okay. So real quick, highlighting some of the things I think we talked about what happened in the district. Very different government than what we have in the city of South Fulton, 15 billion, 700,000 people, both state and local government. Well, in the city of South Fulton, we got a lot of new things going on, including a new government that just started a little bit over a year ago. And so our $65 million budget in FY18 is now actually going to a $109 million budget as of October 1. And so that provides a lot of different opportunities. And I think more so than telling you what's next, we're kind of asking for ideas on what we should be doing next. And so the big thing for all of us is economic development. And so for economic development, we know that our average household size is a little bit under 3 people. We are 99% African American, which means we are the blackest city, maybe not only in the state of Georgia and the United States, but maybe the world. So, I mean, that is something that is a very interesting dynamic. And it is, you know, when you talk about Black Tech Week, I think, you know, serving black people is something that is a very interesting dynamic. And so our median household income is also a little bit higher than we once thought. And so there are a lot of opportunities there. We're around $54,000 median income for 109,000 person population. Even more so when you look at the statistics, we're actually a fairly young city, although, you know, that's a little different than what, you know, the public would have you believe. I think our average age is somewhere in between 35 and 50, which, you know, I just turned 40, so I think that's kind of young, you know. But for us, when we look at innovation, I think, like I mentioned before, we're talking about how we really take something new and apply it to what's necessary to provide a high level of service. So, you know, in D.C., I think we had some success with that. I think Ricky mentioned having an Apple Store-like service delivery model. And so we actually launched a product that did that and was fairly successful. But here in the district, here in South Fulton, I'm still fairly new, so don't hit me over the head. But, you know, it's a little bit different where we're behind on not only technology, but facilities and access. And so the first thing that we're looking for and we're trying to get some help on is really identifying, as Justin said, what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And so what we've done, which hasn't necessarily involved technology until very recently, is we've gone out into the community and kind of done a resource and problem sharing activity that we're calling the Traveling Town Hall, the Mayor's Walk. And we take out once a month, we take our entire leadership team out to the various commercial corridors, and we hear from businesses on what problems they're having, and then we try to solve it. To date, we're about 97%. We identified all of these problems, and then we clear them up within about 30 days. And so the challenge that we're having now is that people are recognizing that, and it's a little bit harder to log these things when you're walking, when people know you're going to be there, and they're bringing all of their problems to you. I think the second thing is this business number that we see. We have about 1,700 businesses. When I started less than 6 months ago, there were about 950 registered businesses in the city of South Fulton. That's a really big deal. That means that our small business engine is really growing quite a bit, and so we are not certain how to respond to them. And not only does that mean providing business solutions and access to whether it be capital and things of that nature, but also how to literally respond to business in real time when this population is growing even bigger than our people population. And so one of the main things that we're looking to do, and I'm sorry, I may have skipped it, but it was our 311, that's what our 311 call center. In most places, it's where you report your potholes. It's where if a dog is running loose in the street and you don't want your kids to get bitten, you know, you give that number a call instead of calling 911. But for us, it also needs to be kind of like a virtual kiosk so that people can actually, whether it be pay a fine or receive information on a court date, or be able to coordinate some type of activity, whether for the traditional code line activities and things of that nature. But the business piece is really kind of hanging out there, and we don't have an answer. So I think we would very much welcome any type of solution from anybody who has, whether the ability to create an app, somebody who can help us with process flow, or just bringing key applications and ideas that may help us develop new programs. And so the way I look at it and the way we look at it is, I've been around the $15 billion government and now the new startup government, and leveraging the same problems as some time that I spent working with Uber is that everybody has the same problem. How do we provide service right now in this moment today and leave with a satisfied customer that continues to use your service? And so I think the answer to that is innovation. The only thing is we're figuring out what question we're trying to answer, and we're depending on y'all for a solution.
You want to share what's next for you all down there?
I'm coming to South Fulton. I'm so interested in that. No, I think for us really wrapping our hands around this concierge model, you know, oftentimes regardless of where I work, zoning has always been one of those touchy subjects, you know, and a lot of it is sometimes they just don't understand the hyperbole of information that is contained within those codes. So for us, you know, listening to the city of South Fulton and the influx of businesses coming in, our number one thing is trying to retain businesses, you know, because what happens, oftentimes you see people migrate to the city. So what we've been very intentional about is we're able to provide you those same amenities, you know, the same quality of life activities, you know, working on the housing stock so that instead of adding to the number that the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer spoke to in the city of Atlanta, how it balloons during the day, what we're trying to do is how do we cultivate those people so that, no offense to the city of Atlanta, so that our residents can stay here, work here, spend their tax dollars here to in turn raise our tax digest. You know, so at the core of all of that is how do we really put forth this effort with the business community to, one, make them understand. You know, oftentimes, how many of you have ever went to start up a business? By a show of hands. And by a show of hands, how many of you thought that was the hardest process ever? You know, so what happens is, and again, a lot of the same people raise their hands, and for that alone, what we're trying to say is if you come to City Hall, it's not our government, it's your government. Our job is to serve you and to walk you through that process. So with this concierge model, instead of you having to guess as to what you want to do, we're going to sit down with you and give you all of the tools, give you all of the backline information to show you and guide you through this process. Because for us on the back end, I would much rather you have it correct than me to have to call you and tell you, this is wrong, you got to start back over again, you're in the wrong tax code, you know, I really don't think you want to come in and just do an app. I think you have so many more opportunities, and then these are the incentives that we're able to offer, whether it's tax credits, just walking you through that entire process, really fulfilling that model with the concierge service is what's next for us. And for me, it's a biggie. I'm all about, I want things quick. I want to get the right answer the first time, and just trying to really relay that same to our customer base.
So for us, what's next around Together for Safer Roads specifically, I mentioned the GEP program, but in a couple weeks, we're going to be in San Francisco actually choosing our next global entrepreneur programs. These will all be tech startup companies. The process started with an application online. I think we ended up with 34 companies around the world that actually completed the application, you know, to try to propose what they want to do, and it's all around roadway safety. We're going to narrow that down to 7 companies who are going to present to us in San Francisco, a little bit like American Idol or one of those shows, right? And then we'll ultimately pick 2 or 3 of them. So that window is closed, but what's coming next in the beginning of 2019 is we'll be going through that same process again. So if you guys have a new business idea, new thought, new opportunity around technology and roadway safety, I encourage you to go to the Together for Safer Roads website, search out that information, and be a part of our third wave of technology and trying to make roadways safer. What I love about the organization is there is a sustainability piece to what we're doing, but it's real, right? At the end of the day, we're saving lives, and I think it's a great mission to be a part of, and it's one of the reasons that I'm happy to say that we're members of that coalition as a private company along with all of our other members, where we truly care about the communities we work in, and we want to make them safer for everybody.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm looking forward to all these projects and covering them at GMA. So before we close, I want to see, does anyone out here have any questions that we didn't cover or just something that you want to touch on? Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, I found it a little difficult to say that. So we actually, I mean, literally the annexation process had fully taken place before the city of South Fulton had come into, I guess, existence. So we are as far south as Old National, well, even Highway 92 in Oakley. We are as far north as Cascade, as far east as, I guess that would be, what do we call